Hey guys, today we're making another character doll. I want to thank you so much for all the positive feedback on my last 2 doll tutorials. Obviously, the more feedback the videos get, the more I'll be making and the faster I'll be uploading them, so I'm really glad you're enjoying them. The character we'll be making today is Merida from Brave. I also want to thank you for all the requests and suggestions for different characters. And if you come to think of more characters you'd like to see that you haven't already requested, feel free to leave them in the comments. You want to begin by mixing a pale skin tone and start sculpting the face. What's great about Merida is that she has a very round face, she doesn't have a very defined jawline or cheekbone, so there aren't really that many details, which makes it a bit easier to sculpt. Also, because she's a 3D animated character, you're able to see her face from all angles, which really helps. When sculpting a fairly simple character like this, I'd recommend having at least 3 or 4 pictures from different angles, and if you're sculpting a more detailed face, I definitely recommend having more pictures. It just makes it so that you're able to be more precise with your work, whereas if you're only seeing a face from one angle, you really don't know what it looks like when you see the person from the side or from underneath, etc. I'd also recommend having at least one picture that you focus on when it comes to the expression, and of course if you're able to find more pictures from different angles of the same expression, the better. Something else I do which is kind of hard to show on camera is that while I'm sculpting I keep checking the different angles and turning what I've already sculpted to make sure it matches up with the pictures. Just because when you're sculpting something from the front, and let's say you're sculpting the cheek, if you make any changes it could also change the quarter angle view or even the profile. Here I'm just using the plastic surgery technique that I used in my baby tutorial, just because her cheek was a bit too flat compared to the expression. I then put a needle tool through the head and removed some clay where I wanted the neck to sit before pre-baking. Then after pre-baking I added the eyelids and the bottom lip. I then added clay to the back of the head, pre-baked again, and made the ears. I couldn't really find a good shot where her ears were visible, so instead I took stand in the characters from Frozen and Rapunzel because the animation is kind of similar. Then bake the head one last time. You don't really get to see her shoes too much, but they look to be very simple leather boots or something like that, so I just made a really simple basic shape for the feet and I sculpted these on knitting needles. For the hands, please refer to my Pocahontas tutorial. I am going to be linking that in the info box, but to save time I won't be showing that in this video. Because most of her body is covered by the dress, you really don't have to sculpt too much unless you want her to be dressed differently, in which case you may want to refer to my Pocahontas tutorial. But I just started adding clay to the torso and smoothed that out, then add a tiny bit of detail to the décolletage or collarbone and gave her the right shape at the chest and belly area. Apparently I didn't get any footage of the sculpture after baking, but you will see the sculpture after the fabric was added in just a bit. But after baking I added the head and then I blushed it with some pink soft pastel and added details using acrylic paint. There is something I want to say before I forget it. On my Pocahontas tutorial, some of you requested the Mad Hatter and some of you requested Maleficent and other characters like that. When you request those characters, please remember to state if you want it to be the classic Disney character or the newer versions. Then wrap the doll in fabric to prepare it for being dressed and start making the outfit. To make a simple version of a dress, I first drew and cut out a simple dress shape from a piece of paper and then cut out two of those from some bluish green fabric. I then cut and glued strips of this gold shimmering off-white color onto her neck and to her shoulders. I then glued on the front and the back of the dress, and the sleeves were pretty much just rectangles or strips of fabric that I wrapped around and glued in place. Now for the fun part, the hair. I didn't have hair in the right color, at least not mohair, so instead I just used white mohair and then the silk dyes. The latex glove is optional, but it will stain your hands. The directions are gonna be on the bottles of the dyes, but I just made a mix of some water and then a few different shades of the dyes. I really didn't measure it at all, I just eyeballed it. I then put that in a microwavable container together with the hair and soaked it really well, poured out any excess back into the bottle, I then microwaved that for about 3 minutes, and you then just want to hold it under the tap until the water runs clear. To curl it, I cut some pieces of wire and some strips of metal. You don't have to use these specific materials, but I would recommend using something non-flammable. I then wrapped it up like this, spritzed it with water and baked it for a few minutes. Then once cool, you can take off the hair and you'll have a nice curl. And to get curls of different thicknesses, you can just use different thicknesses of wire, knitting needles, needle tools, sewing needles, or whatever else you have. Then just glue the curls onto the doll one by one. Try to get the glue to grab onto each strand of hair, just because otherwise you're going to end up with a lot of fallout. And once the glue has set in some areas, you can use a needle tool and just run it through the hair to loosen up the curls or make them look a bit more messy. I remember seeing some behind the scenes of the making of this movie, and don't quote me on this, but I believe they said she had about 150 individual animated curls on her head. I only added about 40 or 45, so, but you know, depending on the size, you can add more or less. And once you're done, add a lot of hairspray and style it to make it sit like you want it to look. Lastly, I created some folds and held them in place with sewing needles. I then sprayed it with fabric stiffener and let it dry.